Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is HAMKA bin SUHAIMI, and I will present the comparisons between Clause 4, 5, and 6 of the ISO International Standards. For the Clause 4, under context of organizations. For the subclause 4.1, understanding the organizations and its context. For ISO 9001, the external and internal issues determines related to the organization's ability to achieve intended outcomes of its quality management system. Compared to ISO 14001, internal and external issues determine related to organization's ability to achieve intended outcomes of its environmental management system. For ISO 45001, the external and internal issues determine related to organization's ability to achieve intended outcomes of its OH&S management system. For the subclause 4.2, understanding the needs and expectations of interested party. And for the ISO 45001, understanding the needs and expectations of workers and other interested parties. For the ISO 9001, the organizations monitor and review information about the interested parties and their relevant requirements. For ISO 14001, the needs and expectations that become the organization's compliance obligations. And for the ISO 45001, the needs and expectations are or could become legal requirements and other requirements. For the subclause 4.3, the scope of the management system. For ISO 9001 quality management system, the types of product and services covered and provide justification for any requirement of this international standard that the organization determines is not applicable to the scope of its quality management system. For ISO 40001, all activities, products, and services of the organization need to be included in the environmental management system. And for the ISO 45001, the activities, products, and services within the organization control or influence that can impact the organization OH&S performance. For the subclause 4.4, the management system and its process. For ISO 9001, establish, implement, maintain, and continually improve a quality management system, including the processes needed and their interactions in accordance with the requirement of this international standard. For ISO 40001, to achieve the intended outcomes, including enhancing its environmental performance, the organization shall establish, implement, maintain, and continually improve an environmental management system, including the processes needed and their interactions in accordance with the requirements of this international standard. For ISO 45001, establish, implement, maintain, and continually improve an OH&S management system, including the processes needed and their interactions in accordance with the requirement. Next, Clause 5, under leadership, which included top management. Under subclause 5.1, leadership and commitment. For ISO 9001, the top management taking accountability for the effectiveness of the quality management system, promoting the use of the process approach and risk-based thinking, the risks and opportunities that can affect conformity of products and services, and the ability to enhance customer satisfaction are determined and addressed. For ISO 14001, top management taking accountability for the effectiveness of the environmental management system, supporting other relevant management roles to demonstrate their leadership as it applies to their areas of responsibility. For ISO 45001, the top management taking overall responsibility and accountability for the prevention of work-related injury and ill health, as well as the provision of safe and healthy workplaces and activities. The top management also protecting workers from reprisals when reporting incidents, hazard, risks, and opportunities, supporting the establishment and functioning of health and safety committees. For the subclause 5.2 policy for ISO 9001, the top management provides a framework for setting quality objectives, includes a commitment to satisfy applicable requirements and continual improvement of the quality management system. For ISO 14001, the top management provides a framework for setting environmental objectives, includes a commitment to the protection of the environment, including prevention of pollution and other specific commitments relevant to the context of the organizations. For ISO 45001, the top management provides a framework for setting the OH&S objectives, includes a commitment to fulfill legal requirements and other requirements, eliminate hazards and reduce OH&S risk, continual improvement of the OH&S management system, and consultation and participation of workers and where they exist. For the subclause 5.3, organizational roles, responsibilities, and authorities. For ISO 9001, the top management ensuring the promotion of customer focus throughout the organization, and also ensuring that the integrity of the quality management system is maintained when changes to the quality management system are planned and implemented. For ISO 14001, the top management ensuring that the environmental management system conforms to the requirements of this international standard, reporting on the performance of the environmental management system, including environmental performance to top management. For ISO 45001, the top management ensuring that the OH&S management system conforms to the requirement of this document, reporting on the performance of the OH&S management system to top management. Next, clause 6, under planning. For the subclause 6.1, action to address risks and opportunities. For ISO 9001, the organization shall plan how to integrate and implement the actions into its quality management system processes and evaluate the effectiveness of these actions. For ISO 14001, the organization shall determine and have access to the compliance obligations related to its environmental aspect and how these compliance obligations apply to the organizations. For the ISO 45001, the organizations shall determine and have access to up-to-date legal requirements and other requirements that are applicable to its hazards, OH&S risk, and OH&S management system. For the subclause 6.2, quality objectives and planning to achieve them. For ISO 9001, the quality objectives shall be consistent with the quality policy and be relevant to conformity of products and services and to enhancements of customer satisfaction. For ISO 14001, the objective shall be consistent with the environmental policy. To achieve its environmental objective, the organization shall determine how the results will be evaluated, including indicators for monitoring progress toward achievement of its measurable environmental changes. For ISO 45001, the OH&S objectives shall be consistent with the OH&S policy. To achieve the objectives of its OH&S, the organization shall determine how the actions to achieve the OH&S objective will be integrated into the organization's business process. For the subclause 6.3, planning of changes which only including ISO 9001, the organization should consider the purpose of the changes and their potential consequences, integrity of the quality management system, availability of the resources, and allocation or reallocation of responsibilities and authorities. That's all from me. Thank you.
Okay, bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum. I am Muhamad Aiman di BADARUDDIN. So I'm going to explain about the comparison for the ISO 19001, 14001 and 45001 for the clause 7 and for the clause 8. So we go for the clause 7, which is a support. For the 7.1 resources, ISO 19001 more focus on the QMS, Quality Management System, which is the organization should determine and provide resources needed to establish, implement and maintain continually to improve the QMS. They should also consider the capabilities of and constraint for the external internal resources and what needs to be obtained from the external providers. So for the 14001, we see that they focus for the environmental management system. So organization should provide resources needed for the establishment, implementation, maintenance and continual improvement, same as ISO 19001, but focus on the environmental management system. And ISO 45001, they also have the same definition, which is the organization must determine and provide the resources needed for establishment, implementation, maintenance and continual improvement, but for the OHS, OHS management system, occupational health and safety. So for the competence 7.2, ISO 19001 define that they must determine the necessary competence of person doing work under its control that affect the performance and effectiveness of its QMS. So it must ensure that this person are competent on the basis of appropriate education, training or experience, and where applicable take action to acquire the necessary competence and evaluate the effectiveness of the action taken. For the ISO 14001, they determine the necessary competence of doing work under its control that affect the environmental performance. The organization must ensure that every person are competent, have the basis of appropriate education, training and experience. Then ISO 45001, the organization must determine the necessary competence of workers that affect its OHS performance. So they must ensure that every workers have the ability to identify hazard on the basis of appropriate education, training or experience, and where applicable take action to acquire. So for the awareness, 7.3, ISO 19001 focus on the every person doing work under the organization's control must aware of the quality policy, quality objective, and their contribution to the effectiveness of the QMS, including to the beneficial to the quality in performance and the implication to the system. So for the ISO 40001, every person doing work under this organization must be aware of the environmental policy and the significant environmental aspect or any related to the actual or potential environmental impact associated with their work. So they must aware of their contribution to the effectiveness of the environmental management system. For the 45001, workers should be aware of the OHS policy and OHS objective. They must be aware of how they can contribute to the effectiveness of the OHS management system. including to the benefits of improved OHS performance. So next one, we go to the 7.4 communication, which is for the ISO 19001, the organization must able to determine the internal and external communication relevant to the QMS. It's including with what it will communicate, when to communicate, and with whom to communicate. So for the ISO 14001, the organization must establish and maintain a process for internal communication between various levels and functions of organization. So they must know the media to use for in the communication related to the environmental management system. So for the ISO 45001, the organization must establish, implement and maintain the processes needed for the internal and external communication relevant to the OHS system. Okay, for the documented information 7.5, we can see there are differences between these three ISO. For the ISO 19001, documented information is defined as meaningful data that is required to be controlled and maintained by the organization and the medium on which it's contained. So, this documented information indicate that the documented information processes, documentation and records. So every documentation must be contained. So for the 14001, the organization environmental management system must include documented information required standard and also those determined by the organization are necessary for the effectiveness of the environmental management system. Then for the ISO 45001, the organization must have document information, which is document and records that required by the ISO 45001 and also those determined by the organization as being necessary for the effectiveness of the OHS management system. So next one, we go to the clause 8. Clause 8, we can see that this more focus on the operation. They only have one subtopic, which is operation planning and control 8.1. So we go first into the ISO 19001. So ISO 19001 say that organization should plan, implement and control the processes as outlined in 4.4. So we must go back to the 4.4 point, which is needed to meet requirement for the provision of products. Okay, so it's defined that they must determine the resources needed to achieve conformity to product and service requirement. Implement control of the processes in accordance with the criteria determining and maintaining. Alright, so the next one, operation planning and control for ISO 14001. The organization must establish, implement and control, same as ISO 90001. Maintain the process needed to meet, but the difference is to meet environmental management system requirement and to implement the action to address risk and opportunity. Okay, so that's the difference between this ISO. So the organization must control plan changes. In case the changes are unintended, the organization must review the consequences of the unintended changes and must take action to mitigate any adverse effect. Okay, operation planning and control must be inconsistent. Should be inconsistent with a life cycle perspective. And consistent with a life perspective, the organization must establish control as appropriate to ensure that environmental requirement are addressed in the design and development process. So next one, ISO 45001, the organization must plan and implement, control and maintain the process needed. The difference is to meet requirement for the OHS management system and to implement the action determined in clause 6. Okay, so the difference between these three is to meet what system. Alright, so organization should establish the criteria for the process. They must set up the criteria and the organization must implement the control of the processes in accordance with the criteria. Okay, so that's all from me for the clause 7 and clause 8. Thank you.
Clause 9 is about performance evaluation. There are some important difference, particularly in clause 9, which is monitoring, measurement, analysis, evaluation, part 1. Here you need to know ISO 14001 deals with measuring environmental performance, including issues related to compliance, while ISO 9001 concentrate on measuring the effectiveness of the QMS, including a focus on ensuring customer satisfaction. ISO 14001 2015 Clause 9 performance evaluation is all about measuring and evaluation your EMS to ensure that it is effective and it helps you to continually improve. For ISO 45001 in year 2018, on the other hand, focus on an organization internal environmental. Clause 9 provides guidance on evaluating the performance of the company OHS management system and covers the following like monitoring, measurement, analysis, performance evaluation, internal audit, management, and review all. 9.2 is internal audit. For ISO 9001 2015, as you can see at the table, the auditor's role is to gauge how well the system functioning by gathering of objective evidence and the process conformance and performance. Implement an internal audit program to ensure that customer feedback, organization change, and risk opportunities have been brought into consideration in ISO 19001. For ISO 14001 2015, the organization must conduct internal audits at planned intervals to provide information on whether the environmental management system conforms to the requirement of ISO 14001 2015 standards. Its own requirement for its environmental management system, and also to check whether the environment management system is effectively implemented and maintained. For ISO 45001 2018, the difference between two of the ISO before, the organization must conduct internal audits at 10 intervals. Also same with the previous, but this will provide information on whether the OHS management system is conforming to the organization own requirement for OSHA management system, including the OSHA policy and OSHA objective, and also the requirement of ISO 45001 2018. It is also provide information if the OSHA management system is effectively implemented and maintained, same as the previous. Last, the 9.3 management review between 19001 2015, 14001 2015, and 45001 2018. 19001 ISO 19001 2015 stated in 9.3 management review stated that the top management of the organization should review the organization's QMS at planned intervals to ensure its continuing suitability, adequacy, effectiveness, and it should be aligned with the strategic direction of the organization. It also plan and carry out management review, considering the status of action from previous management reviews. 14001-2015 state that top management must review the organization environmental management system at planned interval to ensure its continuous suitability, adequacy, and effectiveness. The management review must include consideration of the status of action from previous management reviews. It must also include change in external and internal issues that are relevant to the environmental management system, the needs and expectation of interested parties, including compliance obligation. For 45001, state that top management must review the organization OSHA management system at planned intervals to ensure its continuous suitability, adequacy, and effectiveness. The management review must consider the status of action from previous management reviews. It must consider the extent to which the OSHA's policy and the OSHA's objective have been met. Three of these have almost the same. Clause 10 is improvement. For 10.1 is general. It is stated that the organization must determine and select opportunities for improvement and implement any necessary action to meet customer requirement and enhance customer satisfaction. These actions must include improving product and service to meet requirement as well as address features, need, and expectation. For ISO 14001-2015, the organization also must determine opportunities for improvement and implement necessary action to achieve the intended outcomes of its environmental management system. Same goes as 9001. For ISO 45001-2018, the organization must determine opportunities for improvement and must implement necessary actions to achieve the intended outcomes of its OSHA's management system. It is really ISO 45001-2018 more to related to OHS management. And next 10.2, which is non-conformity and corrective action. First, ISO 9001-2015, when a non-conformity occurs, including any arising from complaint, the organization must react to the non-conformity and, as applicable, take action to control and correct it. Then deal with the consequence. They need to deal with the consequence. The organization must retain documented information as evidence of the nature of the non-conformities and any subsequent action taken as a result of any corrective action. 14001-2015, the action must react to the non-conformity and take action to control and correct it. It must deal with the consequence, including mitigating adverse environmental impact. It must evaluate the need for action to eliminate the cause of the non-conformity action. For 10.2 non-conformity and corrective action, for ISO 14001-2015, the organization must react to the non-conformity and take action to control and correct it. It must deal with the consequence, including mitigating adverse environmental impacts. It must evaluate the need for action to eliminate the causes, and the non-conformity corrective action shall be appropriate to the significance of the effects of the non-conformities encountered, including the environmental impact. So for 45001 is only have in 2018, so non-related in this. ISO 19001 for 10.3 continual improvement. 19001 2015 state that their organization must continually improve the sustainability, adequacy, effectiveness of the quality management system. It just comes from 10.2. It's continue. The organization must consider the result of analysis and evaluation and the output from management review to determine if there are needs or opportunities that must be addressed as part of continual improvement. And the difference between 14001, it is take corrective actions shall be appropriate to the significance of the effects of the non-conformities encountered, including the environmental impact. So that's all, because 45001 is not included in this. So that's all from me.